Hey, welcome to the process. My name is Dr. John Bush. We are moving forward to try to help you win your fantasy football drafts and maybe help you in season as well. But a lot of the metrics are shooting to get you and your team the best draft possible. This is lesson 31, and we are finishing the landscape view of wide receivers. Positional analysis, part 2, even though this really is the third lecture. Okay, so we're going to continue our journey and finish up and move on. I think we're covering running backs versus wide receivers, kind of bringing some of this data we've seen, but putting it together in a comparison. Those tend to be really the tricky decisions, especially later in the draft. Do you stockpile wide receivers or running backs, or what are you doing during the late parts of your draft? And we'll at least try to compare running backs to wide receivers. But right now we're going to finish up the wide receivers. We're going to journey into the key metrics. And the key metrics that I like to look at are average of receptions, reception yards average, reception touchdowns, yards per reception, and the fantasy points. And we're looking at all wide receivers from 2002 to 2020. Was that 18 years? I forget how many years that is. So this is everybody. This is anybody that, gets a target or a snap. Whoever's out there, we're throwing them in the bucket, just looking at everything. Okay. Again, just kind of that broad view approach here. And then we can focus later. There's the average fantasy points. We'll kind of get a view here. The top 5 are in the purple circles. This needs to go up a little bit. But clearly, since 15, we have not seen top 5. In fact, the last 4 years have been some of the worst for average fantasy points. I suspect we are seeing a lot more wide receivers, and some of the rows actually split than previous years. Okay, so I think that's a kind of a trend. So, good for teams, but may not be good for us. I think we would love our wide receiver 3s and 4s to get more than have 5, 6s, and 7s chip away and take points from our, 3rd, 4th, 5th picks. So that's just, my bias. I wish it was a lot more concentrated, so we would be, in better shape. So if you look across at all the metrics, it's very clear. 17, 18, 19, and 20 doesn't look good for all the metrics just across the board. It has not been a strong time for average wide receivers. And it's hard to say. I gave you a guess about more wide receivers. I probably should check that. There's ways to check that. Not going to do that, but right now, but there are ways to do that. But we just need to know this is the area we're at. We'll certainly look at the top 25%, the more viable wide receivers, and see what the trends are. But certainly not very encouraging overall. In this kind of downward trend that we're seeing in the last 4 years, probably makes it harder, especially if you were playing in the years before and you kind of get your rhythm going. Then all of a sudden, it's kind of like the rug gets pulled out from under you, and things that were working really good maybe are not working as good. Maybe they're still working, but not like they were. I don't think the metrics support that things are just the same, right? I think we can eliminate that as a hypothesis, right? Things are not the same in the last 4 years. Data jumps out and certainly we're way below the averages on a lot, or we're below the averages if you look down here at the grand averages here. Okay, we are not doing well. And if you look, I just wanted to highlight the bottom five and just to confirm that we're living in very poor times. And this is scaled, and I probably should have labeled scaled to the average. So subtract average from the metrics, and we see that we are below here, and we hadn't really seen any kind of yearly concentration of that ever. So it is amazing to see such a dramatic drop, and I don't I don't know if it's rule changes. I do not, you know, I've got some hypothesis and we could test. I don't. So at some point, do you go chasing questions, or do you just kind of accept reality for what it is and not, just try to figure out a way to live with it? So right now, I think we'll just live with the knowledge that wide receivers as a group are not going to be as fruitful as they were, 5, 6, 7 years ago. So that's just kind of the environment we're in. And that might shift our thinking a little bit when we look at running back, wide receiver questions later in the draft, kind of that conundrum. But I always like to do scaling as well, just so I kind of see, uh, where metrics are versus just kind of the average. And I like enough data points to get some feel. That's why I like looking 18, 20 years. Okay, a lot of people, don't get that deep, but, I don't know how you can't. Okay, so I did these bar graphs and plotted bar graphs, each metric one at a time, looking at scaled averages. And I think we're going to see, and we can probably go through this fairly quickly, you're going to see a very similar pattern here in all the metrics that I was following. Doesn't mean there are not more metrics to measure. It's just this is what I decided to do for this study. And clarity here, it's not just a little bit off, like 50. We're talking severely below average here. Not so good. So let's turn to the top 25% end of season players. Okay, this is not ADP. This is end of season. This is actual real data at the end of the season. Injuries count, etc. Here we take everything together. So let's look across. You can look by colorization that even the top people, we see a lot of red colorization in the years 17, 18, 19, and 20. Just kind of looking here, seeing some red here, red here, some of the red there. It's maybe not as dramatic as all the wide receivers, but definitely there are issues here, and we've been below average for most of these years. I do note 2020, we do kind of see closer to average here on receptions, so that's a good sign. Closer to tight ends than average. And we have improved the last 4 years. 2020 was the best for average fantasy points. Yards, not so strong at all. In fact, tied for worst in 18 years. So catches more, but not getting more yardage. Okay, what does that mean? Better defenses. That some of that the COVID. Uh, that the wide receivers that were able to go each week were shifting because of the COVID list. So maybe there was some explanation there. Keep that in the back of your mind as well as you scan the data. And certainly we are not in the golden age of, wide receivers here. If you look at the Blues with some of the top scores, and it's been a while since we've been in that world. Since 2015 or so. Not so good. And so if you look at scaled averages, scaled to the average, any minus numbers means below average. And we're talking severely. Look at these numbers. Oh my goodness, reception yards really down. I mean, like almost the worst 4 years of 18 have occurred. Yardage, the worst, second worst. Not so good on touchdowns either. So they're just not the top 25%. These are the folks that the wide receivers, ones, twos, maybe some threes, but definitely these are the ones that are supposed to be bringing your team home. They, have not been doing what, previous 6 years, 7 years from 16 back have done. So if you somehow think this is going to change, I would be surprised. Look forward to talking about this next year. Anticipating, are we going to get out of this slump? Is this a valley? Can we come back to a peak? And that's going to catch some people off strike. Because kind of once you get 2, 3, 4 years of whatever pattern, then people kind of get stuck in that pattern. They don't look at the bigger picture. And, when that switches, if you can be ahead of the switch, and I think that's with any, stock market, any kind of investing like that, if you can beat the crowd to the door, you're going to benefit. So part of why I do these metrics is consider, what's going on and then contemplate what could occur, right? What are possibilities for the, say, 2021 season? So until I see some things different, I'm going to assume we're going to be in this below average environment. And again, that might affect drafting later. We'll see what that means. Anyway, it certainly invites us to think about what this means. Here are the top 25% players. Red bars are below average. So look how great it was if you had fantasy teams 13 to 16. I won some leagues there with some wide receivers. So I don't know. Now that I need to look back, did wide receivers help me more than running backs? You might look at your records. Sometimes saying, why do you do this? Because I just thought of a question. That to me, that's an interesting question for my records. If I could say, what's the number one player position that put me over the top for my winning leagues? Now I want to go stop what I'm doing here, and I'm not going to, and go and figure that out. Okay. That's why I love this game is I love the metrics kind of for themselves as well. So, I like to know the information, and it's fun to be the only one to know about it, of course, that you know of. And there's probably others that are doing the same kind of thing. It's just they're not advertising. Probably in daily sports fantasy plays, there's a lot of money involved, and I'm telling you, there are syndicates out there and groups that are under the radar, uh, you know, working towards, you know, group activities with all sorts of expertise. I mean, that's how it was in certain horse racing venues. If you look in Hong Kong, there's a group that has made headlines over the years that have been successful in Hong Kong horse racing, and they have a whole group of experts working together, kind of as a syndicate, and doing well. So they're out there. If you hear about the individuals, but I'm telling you, there are groups, and uh, probably in Daly's fantasy forts as well. I mean, that's what, if I was going to get to, like, okay, I'm going to go get serious and track some serious money, I would want to gather some expertise in different aspects, right? You need experts, people that are metric, people that are modelers, people that understand, say, the medical side of the game, how the players are moving, or, kind of the film study people. People are experts in, coach and systems and theory of football. I mean, you need all those inputs in making decisions. So, you know, I got off on a tangent. Anyway, that's how I would, get serious with daily fantasy sports, other than just, nickel and dime like me. Uh, take a shot now and then, but not really serious with it. Going across, pretty sad numbers here in the last 4 years. I mean, and here's the last five. Not a lot of touchdowns being scored. That always takes away from the value of the deeper wide receivers now, doesn't it? 19 was an interesting year. What happened there? Maybe 2020 should have been here, but for COVID, I don't know. Just, if anything changes, then it was, if we don't get a lot of COVID, folks on the COVID list, and doesn't shake things up, we might see some turns of some of these metrics. Be curious to see. Again, last 4 years, not our friend as far as fantasy players. So I group into sectors to add to the strength of the data points. So I look at 02 to 6, 7 to 11, 12 to 16 in the last 4 years. And I have circled the tops in age sectors, and this is age sectors: 21 to 23, the young ones; 24 to 26, 27 to 30, and 31 plus. And I asked the question, where are the tops? What age group is controlling in being the dominant one in each of the metrics? And of the five, two of the five were in the older running backs in the old days. Check this out. And here's the other two were the seasoned players. But notice the rookies. Rookies do yards per reception. Is that when they catch it, they're able to move? They've got a lot more juice. Some of the other older wide receivers are, they catch, but they don't add a lot of bonus. What is it? Yaks, yards after catch. One day I'll track that down. That would be an interesting question. Anybody's into data. Is there a discrimination of age here? In other words, you would predict that the highest yaks are in the young players here. And so we look at the tops, we see some old dogs, but here's that same yards per catch here. That's very interesting. Young players are still doing pretty good there. We're starting to lose some of the old dogs. They did not have a top here in 12 to 16, and the last 4 years, 31-year-old and up are not at the top. In fact, they're towards the bottom in most categories. So it's kind of like almost an avoid at this point. So certainly in redraft, I'm looking real hard at not playing the 31-year-olds. And I think we've seen evidence that the peak is 27 to 30. We're seeing that. And here's this metric again. So notice this metric here is probably telling us that the rookies may not get catches, but when they catch, they have enough of the juice to get some yards. So I'm not sure, does that balance enough? If they're catching less but getting more yards, is that going to bring enough points home to justify drafting a little higher than you probably should based on the other metrics? There's still some questions there I need to follow up on. But right now I'm moving on to this. So I think this peak concept, 27 to 30, dynasty players take note here and realize that these young wide receivers are not going to get as many catches probably. Okay? As a group, not in the top 25%, but as a group. So they may be underestimated a little bit. Notice the juice factor goes down, right? And of course, as you would predict, right, the old dogs, bottom. They don't have the wiggle and the juice to get away. Cut them loose. Can't do it. Here's bar graphs, and I did the highlight of the tops versus the bottoms of the metrics for average receptions. Rookie, bottom, and rookie. So 3 of the 4 blocks, rookies are at the bottom of getting receptions. They're not going to catch as many. So that might hide some of their potential. Old dogs did well from 2011 back. That shift is the 30 to 27-year-olds now. Okay, so it may be more of a physical game than it was. Anyway, you should look at the 27 to 30-year-olds. Avoid probably the rookies. Now, if you got one that can really get that yak going, then I guess that might balance it out. Same thing, look at even though fantasy points have gone down, the 27 to 30 consistently are at the top, which is very intriguing. Old dogs, what the hell happened? Look, they just dropped off the map here. Is that COVID? The old dogs getting that COVID and they can't bounce back? Is that COVID or is that something else? Did we get a bounce back? Maybe I'm over playing this. Maybe I am. Okay? Because that just doesn't fall with what we've seen previous. We see some drop, but not like dramatic. I don't know if this has been talked about either. I hadn't heard a lot of, everybody's flapping their chops. I hadn't heard anybody looking and talking about the COVID effect so much. There you go. I actually got some metrics to potentially support some negative aspects. Here's the experience. I know you love these charts. Like, what the hell? That's why I try to cut through the juice here. But the data's here. If you want to dig through it, it's tough. Sometimes you're saying, well, why do you have to do it? Well, you just got some data you got to plow into. Can't be a weenie dog. Okay? No weenie dogs in fantasy football. Okay? Let the losers be the weenie dog. Well, I don't want to do that. Well, take a loss. So, getting to the end of the landscape of the wide receivers, here's the top 25%, guys, and the average points, receptions, yards versus experience here. And I think I did yards per receptions. In some ways, it's in the triangles here. And then fantasy points and then receptions, fall together. But notice we've been on a downward trend, but, after about, this is 8 years in, peak is at 7. So we've seen this peak at 7 concept before. So it looks like that if I'm Dynasty, I'm looking to buy up in here, and I'm looking to sell down in here. Okay. So I think for Dynasty, this is a nice takeaway for you. So you really only want to hold the hot potato 5th, 6th, 7th, and maybe 8th year. 8th year may cost you, but for sure, you don't want to hold them too long after the 8th year. Okay, I think that's kind of neat, actually. Good data here. Pleasing data, shall we say. Okay, that was the end of the landscape of the wide receivers here. We're having lots of fun, lots of questions, actually. Maybe my coffee's fueling my thinking here. That's good. That's good. Okay, this is the process. My name is Dr. John Bush. Is this lesson 31? Anyway, I got so much more going here. It's not even funny. All the data is going to be trickling down here in the next months. Okay, hang with me. Come back. Hopefully I hadn't lost you, but if I have, then that's fine. I'll join your league and take your money. Yeah. Okay, come back. Having fun.